I see a lot of discussion about hallucination rates in the context of legal AI. People talk about what kind of hallucination rate does a tool like ChatGPT have, or maybe Claude, or maybe a legal specific tool like Harvey or Legora. Surely lower is better. I'm here to argue that hallucination rate as a statistic is not at all useful when evaluating a large language model or an AI tool. Without a doubt, models are getting better, tools are getting smarter, and the rate of hallucinations is going down. But what has a far larger effect on the quote unquote hallucination rate, whatever that means, is the actual user of the tool rather than the tool itself. You can have one user that basically doesn't get hallucinations or is able to manage them in a way that allows them to use it for their workflow, and another user who gets a ton of hallucinations despite using the smartest model and the most state-of-the-art tools. I think what bothers me about the obsession with hallucination rates is that it comes from a place of treating large language models and AI tools like they're powerful oracles. They're just supposed to know the correct answer. And they're supposed to be correct enough so that you don't need to check their work. Otherwise, they're not going to be useful for your workflow. This view of AI, I think, doesn't allow you to really get the most out of the tools. They're not oracles. They're very powerful reasoning engines with very, very good reading comprehension ability. In the context of lawyers, AI is very, very good at IRACing a case. So if you ever did an IRAC in law school of a case, I'd encourage you to go to Claude or ChatGPT or any other AI tool, find the most complicated opinion you can find that you actually understand yourself, copy and paste it into ChatGPT or Claude so that it has access to the full text, and ask it to IRAC the case. I bet it'll be pretty good. Knowing that at the individual level, if you give the model or the tool the right context, it's very unlikely to hallucinate. That allows you to start getting more out of these tools. It's not that you need the model to get the right answer out of the gate. You need to understand what it takes to come up with the right answer in the first place. If you've got a legal question that you need to answer, how would you actually go about answering that? Well, you'd probably figure out what jurisdiction is relevant here. You'd probably try to find some primary sources like statutes, maybe regulations, maybe federal stuff, maybe state stuff, depending on what's going on. And then from there, you'd probably read some of the main ones. And then maybe you go into a legal database like Westlaw, Lexis, or maybe even something free like Court Listener, and you write a bunch of searches. You're probably gonna be searching for the statutes themselves, maybe keywords that come up relevant to whatever type of issue you're looking into. Then you'd figure out which of the opinions that you're gonna potentially read are the most relevant, read as many of them as you find necessary, figure out what the court actually says about the issue, and then only then can you actually answer the legal question. And the reason I urge you to break it down into the steps like that is because if an AI is going to come up with the right answer, it has to do that as well. It's never going to just memorize all of the legal answers. And if you're a lawyer watching this, you should definitely know that a lot of legal questions don't actually have black and white answers anyway. So if you just treat an LLM as an oracle and you ask it a legal question and claim that it hallucinates when the answer is wrong, that doesn't actually mean anything, because does a hallucination mean that it read the correct primary sources and didn't interpret them correctly? Or, which is far more likely, a hallucination, as a lot of people describe it, is the AI was not actually able to find the right primary sources. Because it turns out that's almost a harder problem than interpreting them once you have them. And breaking down the problem, it also enables you to really focus on what AI is good at. It's extremely good at reading comprehension. If you find the right primary sources, it's very likely going to be able to interpret them correctly. While the AI is good at searching the web and it can definitely find a lot of stuff for you, it is very, very hard for it to do that perfectly. And that's where you, as the lawyer, can really be involved. And that's where your judgment's going to matter a lot more. Think about it. If you had a junior associate and you asked them to answer a legal question, and you know for a fact they missed some of the key statutes or they just didn't read a lot of the important cases, it does not matter how smart they are. It doesn't matter how good at reading comprehension they are. They're never, ever going to be able to come up with the right answer because they didn't have the right raw materials that are relevant for actually coming up with the right answer. The more you're able to really take responsibility for breaking down the problem into different discrete tasks, each of which the LLM and AI tools are very, very good at, the more you're going to be able to get out of these tools in the first place. You're going to be a lot more confident in your usage of AI because you're going to know what it actually did. You're going to understand that you were the one who set up the search queries in Court Listener, and you were able to make sure that you found the 10 most relevant opinions, and you just had the AI read each one on its own to summarize it and help you find some of the patterns. You're going to know that you actually found the right statute for your jurisdiction and you actually told the AI and even copied and pasted it into the conversation. And you're going to start being able to actually trust the tool. And the reason you're going to be able to trust it if you break down the problem and think about being responsible for giving it the right primary sources is that you're going to be delegating tasks to the AI that it's exceptional at. Reading comprehension, doing IRAC analysis, finding patterns, analyzing a statute and comparing to how a court actually used it in a real case. That's the kind of stuff that it's really good at. In a way, you can think of it like navigating a ship across the world. If you were going to take a kayak across a pond and you set off from your dock and you were just 1 degree angled and you paddle over to the other side, you might end up a few feet to the left of the exact opposite side of the pond. Now, if you were sailing from Europe to the United States and you were 1 degree angled to the left in your journey, you could potentially be miles and miles off of where you need to be. And by breaking down the AI's tasks and by thinking about discrete chunks, you prevent that larger problem. Because if you're going to have it do something end to end, if it's going to actually be able to answer a legal question end to end and do all the research for you without you intervening at all, you are betting that it's not going to make a single mistake along the way. And if it does, everything else is going to completely blow up. Whereas if you break things down, you can check its work incrementally and you can make sure that the tasks it's doing are small enough so that you can redo them if it did make a mistake, and they're small enough that it's just not going to make a mistake. Regardless, I still think it's interesting to think about how often models hallucinate, but I encourage you to think more about what you can do to prevent them from hallucinating so that you can get more out of the tools rather than just being afraid of statistics and assuming that eventually one day there's going to be a tool that doesn't hallucinate at all. I'm telling you that's never going to happen. And if you take responsibility for the hallucinations, you are going to be able to get so much more out of the tools.